Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Maybe you've been listening for a while, or this is your first episode. If you like what you hear, would you do us a favor by rating and reviewing us on iTunes? This is a fantastic way to tell us you enjoy what we are creating. Also, if you want more MTSS resources, sign up for our weekly newsletter using the link in our show notes, and check out our website for all the blogs and guides you would ever need about MTSS. Implementing an MTSS platform in a large district comes with significant challenges, from achieving staff buy-in to managing data at scale and aligning diverse needs. Today, we have Jenna Davies, District MTSS Specialist for the School District of Manatee County, Florida, to share some of her firsthand experiences unpacking the hurdles of MTSS implementation and strategies and the successes that come along with building a sustainable system to support all the students in her district. So welcome, Jenna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Jenna, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. I know you've accomplished a lot of really great things in Manatee County. And so I want to just first have you give a little context for our listeners about your school district. Tell us about what makes it a great place to be.
Yeah. So School District of Manatee County is based in Southwest Florida. We are a district of over 50,000 students. We have a lot of diverse learners. Within that district, we have 67 total public and charter schools. Our students are, 60% of our students are on free and reduced lunch, and we have 15% of those students are English language learners. In my role, I lead district-wide MTSS implementation by coaching school multidisciplinary teams on how to build school infrastructure, develop staff capacity, apply problem solving, and use data to drive instruction and decision making across all tiers.
Awesome. So how long have you been implementing MTSS district-wide?
Yeah. So in Florida in 2008, the Department of Education released their response to instruction and intervention implementation plan. And then by 2011, our state had shifted to statewide MTSS. So since then, we've adopted MTSS in Florida as our framework for supporting students academically and behaviorally. We made the decision to adopt Branching Minds this year as our way to streamline MTSS in an effort to shift to more problem solving, use data more effectively, and empower our teachers.
So, rolling out something as comprehensive as MTSS infrastructure and framework in a large district is a huge undertaking. So what were some of the first steps that you took to get the ball rolling in this process?
Yeah, so we really wanted to focus on those main pillars of an effective MTSS. And those components are leadership, a 3-tiered model for instruction and intervention, problem-solving process, data and evaluation, capacity and infrastructure, and communication and collaboration. And so we really wanted to target all of those areas to start to build a comprehensive system. And so to really get that rolling, we have collected feedback on our current systems and practices. We've involved multiple levels of stakeholders in decision-making and discussion to get to a point where we have a shared vision for MTSS. Another important step is really to align your MTSS practices with your school improvement plan, because your school improvement plan drives continuous improvement. And MTSS is in and of itself a continuous improvement framework. And then before we can consider any sort of capacity building and professional development with our educators, we really had to make sure that we had consistent expectations and the infrastructure in our schools to have space and time to actually execute the work.
So when you talk about the infrastructure in your schools, are you talking about like scheduling, talking about personnel, that kind of thing?
Yeah, those are absolutely examples. We really wanted to focus on teaming structures as well. So making sure we had problem solving teams at our tier 1 level, our tier 2 level, and our tier 3 level. And those different problem solving teams are looking at data in a different way,
Yeah.
asking different questions.
So, I'm just going to kind of probe into that a little bit because I know that there's many district administrators and leaders that listen to this, and some of that stuff, that infrastructure work that has to happen prior to sort of the implementation part or like the PD part is so like that's kind of a turning point for many people because it's like, how do we make this work? How do we find the time? How do we make sure our teams do it? Do you have any sort of suggestions or any kind of ways that you guys went about sort of evaluating how to make that happen?
Um, so our schools are individually responsible for creating their scheduling for students, what who they would like to serve on those teams and what their specific roles and responsibilities are. So within our schools having autonomy, we still have our district expectations for those key components that all schools will have a tier 1 instructional leadership team. All schools will have a tier 2 teacher collaborative or department level team. And all schools will have a tier 3 problem solving intensive support team.
Yeah. So you at the district level sort of kind of gave this like, here's the expectations and sort of set them loose into figuring out how to go about that.
Absolutely, because our schools are all very different. And
Mhm.
so while we still have the same, universal core challenges, we're working with different diverse groups of learners. We have different community needs. And so we really wanted schools to be able to be responsive to those needs within their community, and build a system that still fit within our district expectations, but also worked really well for that individual school and their students.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think that providing that autonomy for this individual schools to tailor to the needs is really key in how, allowing MTSS to sort of actually, it's sort of MTSS for a mindset of like we're providing what they need when they need it. So with that, so many different moving parts, because you're talking about all these different moving parts in kind of a large district. How are you creating systems that ensure that MTSS doesn't just work right now, but continues to thrive in the future?
Yeah, so one thing we've implemented in Manatee County are our site-based MTSS facilitators. And so these are our expert instructional leaders on every campus. Some opt to have one focus on academics and one focused on behavior. Other schools have that be the same person. But they are really the person who is getting they're the person who's going to be serving and supporting all problem solving teams. They're getting ongoing monthly training, robust training from us on all sorts of different things, from problem solving to using data to action planning. This year, we rolled out Branching Minds to really streamline that MTSS work. And so in doing that, we also developed a district professional development plan that was really a train the trainer model. And so what that did is it enabled each of our schools to have on average between 7 and 10 individuals who could serve as mini experts in their specific area. And the intention behind that is we were building capacity at schools by targeting specific job roles. And then from there, schools could implement their own professional development plan with teachers to target the different areas that based off their data they needed to focus on. Another thing that we've done with action planning is we've used what's called the School Assessment of MTSS, or SAM. This year, since we rolled out Branching Minds, we went ahead and we subbed the SAM for the Roots report. And so that data comes from a series of questions where our teams, specifically ILT, were asked to come to a consensus on different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, use that information to determine what their areas of need are and also what's working well that we want to sustain and continue going forward.
Yeah. Well, and it's really great for the listeners. We do have a version of the Sam, we call it like the Sammy guide or something. And basically, it's a rubric to help you kind of evaluate where you're at within the MTSS implementation process. And so, I'll share that in the show notes so that people they can access that. But yeah, I think that you're right in the fact of like really trying to hone in on what are the individual needs. And I like the idea of doing that site-based or the kind of teams that have been trained, the train the trainer, because that also helps with buy-in. Am correct in saying that? How is that going with that group of people? Is that helped enable things to sort of implement quicker?
Yeah, I think one really effective way to get buy-in is when you involve multiple levels of stakeholders and you're lending a voice to those stakeholders. And so it's not just about meeting with stakeholders and collecting feedback, but it's really making sure that that feedback is shifting practice and driving decisions around policy and procedure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these strategies. What have you found to be most effective for keeping everyone from central office to individual schools aligned and working together towards your common MTSS goals?
Well, I will say from the beginning that it is a work in progress. We have a lot of room for growth. And I think that's very natural because MTSS in and of itself is continuous improvement. So we're constantly looking at data to determine where we can improve. But some simple strategies are continuing to share and reinforce expectations and monitoring that those expectations are being followed. As I mentioned, collaborating with multiple levels of stakeholders is really important to make sure we're all moving toward the same goal. This also comes into play with that school improvement plan and really monitoring implementation and seeing based off that data where do we need to provide some additional coaching and support. In my role, I've found just being present and available is key to building trust with educators and making sure that they feel supported through their efforts.
What does it look like to be present for you?
Yeah, it means just to be available. So whether it's meeting, doing a site visit, whether it's hopping on a Teams call, being ready to answer the phone, respond to email. I've also created some different resources based off of what our educators have asked for support with. And so just really being able to respond to those specific requests and knowing that they can reach out whenever and get that support.
So, in all of this, like looking back and part of this journey starting how many years ago, um, what would you say has been really the most challenging part of the journey?
Yeah, so I think I would say it's shifting those long held misconceptions around what MTS is and is not, um, and helping educators understand that all the wonderful things that they do every day really are MTSS. It's not just this extra thing, this initiative. It's that framework that really organizes all of the work that they're doing. Um, Also, just reinforcing those basic statements like are all students are general education students first. MTSS is not a pathway to ESE, but they do merge and work together. So I think just reinforcing again that common language and common belief is critical.
Yeah. Well, and that's so hard because some of those long held misconceptions are there because of maybe some practices that weren't as great, right? Or that the idea, the RTI model in my experience was really used to in a lot of cases used to move kids towards special education when, understanding that MTSS is supposed to work together with special ed and it's not the pathway. I think you're right in saying that. And it's just hard to counteract that. And it takes so much work and consistency in the messaging that you provide. So much of probably your job is about messaging and how you present things to staff. So, what has been the most rewarding part of this?
Oh, I would say the most rewarding has been really just so much positive feedback that we've had this year since implementing branching minds. It really has um, just like revolutionized the way that we're approaching MTSS. And the proof has really been in the pudding. I was able to pull some data comparing our implementation so far this year with Branching Minds compared to how we were streamlining MTSS with a different platform last year. And just from this point, we've seen a 67% increase in student intervention plans. We've delivered 10,614 and 457 intervention minutes, which is just an astounding number of support to students. We've also seen a massive increase in our communication with families and also in holding problem-solving meetings with students and parents. So just being able to have evidence that this is working, and we know that our students are then getting more support, and our teachers are feeling like it's easier and more sustainable than it's ever been, despite actually doing more. It's an incredible metric, and we're so happy to celebrate that success.
That's amazing. I love hearing the data, right? Some of these lead measures, right? Because so often we look for those, this is the student outcomes, right? Like that's the stuff that we really want to see later down the road, but sort of in the midst of the beginnings of implementing, whether it be the MTSS platform or even just MTSS in general, sometimes these small wins are the things that you need to keep going, of seeing like, look at how many intervention plans we've written. Look at the support that we're able to give students more effectively, and being able to document that and have that sort of as markers of your success along the way is so key. I love that you shared that. And I think the one important factor, that idea of the communications with families, because I know that that's such an essential part of the MTSS framework, and such an essential part of just education in general, right? Like we're partners with families and in the communities to help support students. And so I think being able to document that and say, these are all the ways that we've worked with families is a really great of point of success for you all. So for larger districts that are starting this MTSS journey, what do you think that you advise for sort of maybe some top 3 priorities that they should have?
Yeah, I think starting with developing and communicating a shared vision and district-wide expectations around MTSS early and often, and reinforcing that throughout the year. I would recommend examining the current practices and systems that are in place. So when we're looking to implement MTSS, there are probably some really great things that schools are doing right now that should be sustained. Whereas there might also be some areas that we need to identify what our barriers to success are, how are we going to overcome those hurdles, and build our action plans from there. When I think about examining those systems, I think also really about that tier one, because all of our students are tier one students first and foremost. And so making sure that we have really strong core universal practices that support all of our learners within a building is critical. And then lastly, I would say, coming back to infrastructure, if you don't have the systems and the teaming structure, the time and the place to actually do the work, you really can't get to that part where you build educator capacity. And so having that piece first makes sure that we have the space to actually begin the practices that we want to implement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't, if you don't have the time for it, educators will feel the burden of that. And it makes it so much harder to actually go and do the work when you just don't feel like you have the time or the support and behind the scenes. And so it's so essential that work that leaders can do to help make that easier for teachers. So I mean, in all of this, I mean, this is such exciting work that you're doing with your district. And it's really fun to hear how, even just implementing a year into implementing a platform, how that's like changed some of the work. So what's next for your district? Like what are you seeing sort of as you kind of go into the end of the school year and even looking into the next year? Cause I know district administrators are already thinking about next year. What are some exciting things on the horizon for you all?
Yeah, really, we just want to focus on continuing to implement that MTSS framework, and continuing to support implementation of branching minds. Florida in the fall was hit with a series of hurricanes, and we really lost a lot of instructional time, as well as time to build capacity with our educators. And so while while we're able to draw quite a few successes from this first year of implementation, we really want to look at next year. What are the gaps that we had because of those limitations on time and space? And how are we going to address them so that next year's implementation is not just a continuation of what we've been doing, but an improvement. And through that process, continuing to celebrate the big and small successes along the way.
Well, that's amazing. I love hearing the stories of how this work is actually happening because, there's so many times where I write and talk about stuff in theory, but I love hearing the actual on the ground, like what that looks like for your teachers or for your schools. Would you say that if there's anything that's like highlights from this year that you feel like you shared a lot of different statistics, but if you have like maybe a school specific example of something that has occurred where you're like, this is the magic of MTSS, anything that comes to mind? I know I'm throwing this at you.
Yeah, I think just being able to sit in on some of our problem solving meetings and hearing educators collaborate with each other, discussing the different group progress charts, really having data at their fingertips that used to live in a bunch of different places. It's done wonders for our teams to really be able to work together toward the same goal of supporting our students.
I love hearing that. That's a great example. And that is exactly when the MTSS magic happens in that collaboration. Well, thank you so much for just hopping on with me and chatting about the work that you're doing. We love you guys over at Manatee County and so glad that we can be a small part of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.